Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. Mom and I are both grateful that you can join us for another episode. And we are excited today. We have Dr. Margot McKinnon on with us. Margot is the author of The Exquisiteness of Being Human in the Body, Mind, Spirit, Soul, Oneness, Dominance Theory, a guide to elevating your five dimensions of self, being a spirit dominant person. Margot needed decades to learn how to become fully human in the body mind dominant world. For many years, she wanted to go home, back into the unconditional love of the spiritual dimension from where we all have come. She found her sole purpose as a high school English teacher, helping teens turn their spirit dominance into the superpower and create the life their spirit wants to live. Margot earned a doctorate from the University of Oxford with a thesis on how to bring spirituality into Canadian schools. She runs courses on spirit dominant leadership and Ask the Universe meetups where members learn how to hear the universe speak to them. So, welcome. We're excited to have you on the podcast with us today.
Well,
Very
thank you
much.
so much for the invitation.
So, you got started in schools, and how did that happen for you to teach them the spirit?
Well, this is what I'll tell you, but it's not what I would say in a job interview. Let me give you. So I was 4 years old, and I was a little kid who could see spirits, and I had visions, and I had a voice that talked to me, and I could see into the future, but I didn't know that because it hadn't happened yet. But over time, I realized that's what I was doing. I was 4 years old and I came upstairs. My family was in the basement watching television. And I came upstairs to tuck my little doll Michael into his crib. And I was pulling up the blanket and I heard this deep voice out of the darkness say, "You are to be a teacher." And my little 4 year old self said, "Okay." Like I wasn't afraid, wasn't, it was such my normal that I didn't even question it. Although I did question it when I was in university because I had more lucrative opportunities come my way, but I made that commitment at 4, so I stuck to it.
Nice.
I love that. And it's funny how that happens, right? Is we get a lot of times this, I mean, some of us it's later, but we get this calling early on, and it's rather we listen to it or not. And then we were speaking a little bit before we jumped on here just about, how the universe kind of carves out some of these paths for us to go down.
Yes, I think so. And I've heard people calling it a blueprint. We were born with a blueprint. And I really like that concept now because I hadn't really thought of my life that way. I was always very curious about what's in my destiny as to what the spiritually I'm supposed to be doing with this life and what is of my own free choice.
Yes.
And I've explored that most of my life, just figuring it out. But now I blend it together so that I know whether this is part of my destiny. I can feel it, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And some things are a free choice, like, do I want to go to this restaurant or that restaurant? Would I like this for breakfast or that for breakfast, But the big things are part of my destiny.
So, yeah, which I find very interesting because I love that we do have the free will to make some choices in our life and not everything is predestined.
Yes, but I was thinking about our blueprint because some people say, oh, everything that happens to you in your life, you chose before you came here. And I don't believe that. I think that there are certain things, I think we intuitively know whether this is on our pathway or not on our pathway. Um, and sometimes we choose things like, let's say, a relationship, and you get all those red flag signals that you shouldn't go down that pathway in that relationship, and you ignore them. Oftentimes, because you say, well, I can't be rude. Oh, I need to help that person. And then you find your whole life kind of blows up around it. Um, And I don't think that you chose to be on that from the other side. I think this thing gets in the way, and you make some choices that take you off your blueprint.
Yeah.
Because imagine this, you know how when like vision boards were all the rage and people were picking out of magazines and building these vision boards. Um, Imagine being on the other side, ready to come down as a human being, and you create your human being vision board. Is it really going to say, "Ooh, I want to be in an abusive family. Let's find a picture of that." Ooh, because of that, I'm going to be go into addictions with alcohol and drugs. Oh, let's put that. Then I'm going to become homeless. Then I'm going to lose all my. I don't think anybody did that. I think that you come down here with a beautiful, great expectation for your life. That's from Charles Dickens, Great Expectations, his book. But with a great expectation for your life. And I think sometimes we get caught up in an abusive family and it takes you off your blueprint. Yes, we can learn from that, which is the best way to handle it. You say, okay, I'm going to learn from that. I'm going to grow. But what I really deserve in life is magnificent life, a very rewarding, very rich, very warm life. And I come to that a lot because I taught 5,000 teenagers, and some of them were going off their blueprint. And part of I thought my job was to get them back on so that they didn't lose themselves.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
It is.
Oh, I thought you had a question.
Well, I don't have a question. It'd be interesting to watch you do it though, because we know what teenagers are like and how they don't want to listen anyway.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think deep down, I used to when I had a lot of getting to know you activities when I first met my students, and one of them was I would give them it was a boring little essay, and we would only read the first couple of pages because it was that boring. But it was, well, to me, it was. It was a man who went to a dinner party, and it was an essay, and a man who went to a dinner party, and the dinner party was, you brought your seven wonders. And this man loved bugs and bacteria, which is not a fascination of mine. But so his whole essay was on bugs and bacteria and how fascinating they were. But anyway, I said to my students, all grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, because I taught high school. And I said, what are your seven? If you were invited to a dinner party, what would be your seven wonders? And they would write them on a piece of paper. And I said, if you want to give them to me, you can. And I'll keep an eye out for any kind of articles, films, anything that I find on your wonder, and I'll put it on your desk in the morning. And so that then I got this little lineup at my desk with kids with folded up pieces of paper. Now, reminder, I didn't even know them then. I was just meeting them for the first time. And they'd say, am I allowed to wonder about this? And I'd open up the piece of paper. And of course, I have a very big, loud teacher voice, which my mom used to say, you don't need to use your teacher voice around here. Anyway, um, so I read them and it would say, number one, is God real? Where do I go after I die? Do I have a soulmate? So many of them were really wondering about these spiritual questions, which used to be, you know, back in Greek and Roman times, that's what education was understanding philosophy. And I said, is that what you wonder about? Well, yes, but I'm wondering, am I allowed to wonder that? And I thought, when did our school system, and you and I are only 3 hours apart, or you're up the road from me, so we have the same school system. But when did our school system become a place where kids had learned to wonder if they are allowed? And that prompted me to say, because in our public school system, we removed all the religion, all the religious components, but we didn't replace it with anything.
Yeah.
And then kids So kids thought, well, where am I allowed? And we used to engage in those conversations. And eventually they'd say, are you ever worried you're going to get arrested for letting us talk about our ideas about God, the human spirit? I mean, I taught English literature. What do you think Hamlet's all about? You know, Shakespeare's Hamlet, where he sees the ghost of his father on the top of the castle, and it was required reading Hamlet. And, so we would talk about, well, have you ever seen a ghost before? What do you think about the spiritual, the supernatural dimension of life? Anyway, I told the kids that they could wonder all they wanted in my class. But the point there was what my PhD, I left teaching soon after I realized the kids were wondering if they were allowed to wonder. And I went to Oxford to do mine in England, because in England, their educational model is that to be an educated person, all students, all graduating students should be able to articulate their beliefs about the spiritual nature of the human being.
Interesting.
And they learn that all the way through. They take kind of a religious education model, but spirituality is in there. I actually, when I did my interviewing over there for my research project, I found like filing cabinets in their office with a whole filing cabinet on ghosts. All right, written right on there. And here our kids are wondering if they're allowed. So how do our children, how do they understand those fundamental questions? How do they know how to understand them? Like, what are some systems? I mean, you can learn it in terms of a religion, you can learn it experientially, so anyway, that's why I did that. Uh, and my teenagers were quite profoundly interested in that. So when I had students and I could see they had gotten off their blueprint, I could say to them, who are you really? Who are you as a human being? And do those actions, those behaviors that you have right now, is that going to get you farther in your life to create the life you want to live? Or is it going to take you down a pathway where your life is going to be very hard?
Yeah.
And they really they excelled. And when there was space for them to talk about those things, the disengaged kids' marks went up like you wouldn't believe.
Beautiful. That's lovely.
That is lovely. And I think we need more of that in the schools and with our children, because I do think we have become such a disconnected society with like social media and a lot of these different things. And I think there's benefits to it too, because I think there's a lot of knowledge out there on social media and different platforms like that. But I think that there's a lot of disconnection with it as well. And, being told in schools that, you can't wonder and stuff like that. I think that's amazing that you brought that back into these children's lives. And it would be nice if we could see that, yeah, replacement of religion with something else, because I think a lot of people, children, adults, we're all searching for something.
We are. And, I researched, it was a qualitative study, meaning that I went out and did interviews of many people. I was going to do a comparative actually of England's system versus where we are. We're in the province of Alberta for any listeners in Canada. But I was going to do a comparison. So, what are the teachers saying about spirituality? And I was using the word spirituality, not religion. I'm not a religious person myself. I mean, I went to Sunday school, Anglican, when I was a small child, but my dad, who was very Christian in the kind of Anglican sense, he said, well, draw God. What are you learning in your Sunday school? Draw a picture of God for me. And so I drew the old man in the sky with the long beard. I think there might have been a lightning bolt where he was judgmental and calling us all sinners and everything. Um, I had drawn that, and he just looked at it. And my dad was like a real even-tempered person. He said, "Nobody knows the face of God. God is mysterious, and God does not carry a lightning bolt ready to stab people." God is a loving being that's mysterious. Um, and so anyway, we stopped going to Sunday school because he didn't think we were getting the proper, in his version, the proper. This is mysterious. And let's go back to the idea. I had a very Christian dad. Not that we read the Bible or any of these things, but he really believed in Jesus and loved Jesus, which I would say I do too, because, from what I understand about Jesus, I can really respect that and get behind that. But anyway, yes, so he was of that nature, the belief system, but at the same time, he had this daughter who, as a little girl, my mom used to have to come in and do a Ghostbuster routine in my room before bed. Like every night, it was are there any in your cupboard? Do they hide behind your curtains? Are there any under your bed? And I would sort of get into my bed thinking, well, they come at night when everybody's sleeping, and I'd wake up in the night with faces all looking at me. So it
Yeah.
was a bit scary. So I was the only child out of the four of us who could slip out of bed and crawl in with mom and dad at night, because if I got scared,
Yeah.
you know.
My youngest was like that. Every night we had to, because he'd get into bed and then he'd be like, "That boy is sitting there looking at me, Mom." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we're just gonna ask him to go home, and if you're not scared of him, he can come back in the day when you're not scared of him, but he needs to go." And so we would do that. That was like a nightly ritual, right? Sending things away and
Well, it's interesting you say that, because in my research for my PhD, I had to do a lit review and find out research studies, and there was quite a fascinating. His name is Alistair Hardy, and he started researching in the 1960s. He was a like a marine biologist, PhD from Oxford, and but when he retired, he posted a question in the newspaper that said, "Have you ever had an experience that was out of your ordinary everyday that you may consider religious or experiential, and come and tell your stories?" Well, that study's still going. Like, he's long gone now, but because he retired when he started and it's called the Hardy Foundation, and it's based in England, and they collected stories, and then they plotted like what happened to people over time, because of course they were adults coming to tell their stories. It wasn't necessarily little kids. But what they found was, if they had parents that normalized the experience, like you did, um, then they had better mental health outcomes. And if their parent said, "Oh, that's evil, you're listening to the devil. Oh, that's your imagination. Oh, don't be so silly. Oh, you're just trying to get attention." Because then the child, because that experience is real to them, probably in some cases more real than the everyday walking
I
to
think
school.
I think with Kim, she was like only 10 months old. She was in the playpen, and she was crying. I was doing dishes in the kitchen. I thought, I'll give her a minute and I'll be right there. And all of a sudden she quit crying. So I come around the corner to find out why. And I watched these footsteps going towards her playpen, but she was already in high gear watching what was in front of her as well. And so she was already at that point identifying that there was something else out there. I'd already been seeing them too, but I mean, for her to see it and for me to acknowledge that at such a young age, it's like, isn't that amazing that she sees, like me, it was so very cool. She identified it that young. So, yeah.
Yes, and some kids who had parents who denied the experience,
Yeah.
they would still try and search somebody out. And it was quite often a teacher, a sympathetic teacher that they could tell their story to, um, who might be able to normalize it. And the kids who are quite spiritual, I used to have kids in my class who would say, "You're a seer too, aren't you?" Well, how do you know that? Because I can see you are. Okay. So, but I remember one boy in my class and his parents had really made it that he had mental illness because he could see things. And he came to me and said, "You're a seer too." And I wrote my first book, The Exquisiteness of Being Human, and I was in like chapters, a big, like a Barnes and Noble store if you were in the US. And I had my table and I was selling my book there. And oh, doesn't he come in? And he smelled so much like vodka. And he sat down and I said, "What's happened to you?" But he was fine when he was in my class because he had somebody to help him navigate. But then when that disappeared, then he just couldn't cope
Hmm.
because he didn't know how to integrate it into his life. And I think as a parent, they have an imaginary friend. Well, how do you integrate that? So what the research is saying is not to go in and start superimposing your own beliefs. Oh, that's this, or if a child has a conversation with God, then you go and superimpose your notion of God on that child, or you explain it to that child from your own. Just listen and ask some interesting questions. And I'll give you an example. Would you like one? With
Yes,
my own
please.
son. Okay. So I'm uh, tucking my 3-year-old. Of course, my kids are all in their 30s now, but I've been tucking my 3-year-old into bed. And he said, Mom, before I was born, I was talking to God. I said, "Oh, really? Is God a man or a woman?" Uh, God's not a man or a woman, but the voice is deep. So I'm going to say he. And my son was like an articulate little kid as soon as he could start rounding out those letters. Um, he said, uh, yeah, I was talking to God and I said, "What does God look like?" "Well, God doesn't look like anything. It's like you're looking into a white cloud, but you know it's God." Okay. Well, what did God say? "Well, God told me I had to come down and be a human." Oh, and what did you say? "I told him I didn't want to come." So why not? "Well, because it's so nice over there, Mom. And it's not very nice down here." Okay. So did you tell God that? "Yes, I did." "And what did God say?" "He told me I had to come down." So I asked to see my mother. And he took this picture out of a picture album. And he showed me my mother. And I said, "Oh, she looks mean. And I don't want to come down and be her son." And but God told me I had to. And when God tells you to do something, you do it. And so I came down, I got inside your body. And then when I was born, I looked in your face and I thought, "Oh, you're beautiful. And I'm glad you're my mom."
Aw.
And but he had a very complicated, very like complicated birth. So I think that conversation happened like, am I going to stay or am I going to go?
Mhm.
But even when he said I look mean, I uh, I didn't want to superimpose anything. I didn't want to superimpose my notion of God. I didn't want to just ask questions. Just be curious, be open. And it's interesting because I have had readers, because I put that story in my book, and I've had readers saying, "Oh, my 3-year-old told me that he was given a picture by God, like a photograph."
Interesting.
So since then, I realized that when you have your life review and you have near-death experiencers come back and talk about their life review,
Hmm.
they say it comes to them in photographs of their life and video frames of their life. I thought, oh, isn't that interesting that God would show a photograph so that then I would have been on my son's blueprint to come down and be my son.
Right.
And so now I figured out a system. I actually teach it, but it's too much to go into right now. But I teach a system about how you can create your digital vision board using your photographs. And it helps you get back onto your blueprint and to extend your blueprint so that you can actually look. Sorry, I always fall out of my chair. So I have to always, the next thing you know, I'm sliding out from my chair. But anyway, I figured it out how you can start seeing your blueprint through your own photographs, and then God, and I'm using the word God, but universe, creator, oneness, however you see it. Um, and so now you can start designing and getting back in touch with your blueprint through your photos.
We
So,
love that.
yeah.
That's very interesting. It's funny. I had a friend, and her young daughter was probably around 3 or 4, and she used to say to her, "Well, my other family." And so my girlfriend would say to her, "Oh, well, what other family?" Like, well, my other mom. And so she'd have just same thing as you, right? Just
Yeah.
ask those questions. And I did that with my boys too. And mom did that with us because we just ask those questions. Like, because I think you're right. As soon as you start putting your own ego in,
Mm-hmm.
then you're swaying where they're going. I find now, like, I have a young grandson who is quite spiritual, and he's 4. And so his mom often asks me questions. Well, he seen this or he experienced this. And I'm like, well, ask him this question or get him to explain this. And then let's teach him how to deal with this as opposed to just letting him float aimlessly out there. Let's show him how to protect himself or how to, you know, send things away if they're negative, those kind of deals. So it's very interesting. I think just because of the way that I was raised and how I raised my children, now you can pass that down. So I think it's great that you're showing people all these different things.
Well, yes, and we have in school, because I really want to show you this because it's just such a nice little photograph. I
Yes,
mean,
please.
photographs now, but it's a nice little pictorial of looking at our different dimensions of self. And I think our school systems are too mind dominant. And I'd love to share with your audience what that looks like. It's too mind dominant, where it's logical, rational, uh, math and science are elevated over dance and music. You
Yes.
know,
Yeah,
uh,
please do. Yeah.
yeah. So, would you mind if I just share with your
No,
audience?
we'd
Go
love
for it.
that. We'd love
All
that.
right. Okay. So I used to, because I didn't know any better, and thank goodness we can all evolve and grow and get older and learn new things. I always say I know a lot about what the universe has told me. I don't know all the stuff it hasn't told me. So, and I don't know if I ever really want to feel like, oh, I know it all, because then it must mean my time on earth is complete. And so I plan on just keep going into my 90s. Um, so I used to have where I was comfortable with my spiritual insights just coming in whenever they wanted, and but not really deliberately accessing my spirit dimension and integrating everything. Anyway, I was doing my master's degree at the University of Calgary, and I was doing it on teacher professional, how principals can create organizational culture for teachers to do professional growth and learning. Doesn't that sound like really academic, scholarly thing, right? I had to take 10 courses, and then we had to write a thesis on a research project, which was teacher professional learning for me. Anyway, I took one course, the final course out of 10. I took it just for myself, one I was interested in. It was called Philosophy of Mind. And the first question was when we sat down as a group, it was a master's PhD class. So there might have been 15 people in there. And why did we take this course? And everybody, they were interested in philosophy or metaphysics or whatever. And when it got to me, I said, I'm fascinated by what is my mind talking and what's my spirit. So I'm hoping this course will help clarify what that is. And then they said, what do you mean by spirit? And so it became this big conversation. It opened up a whole lot of territory because suddenly even these adult masters and PhD said, are we allowed to talk about all these? Yes, we're allowed. We open space for the allowing. Anyway, the first homework assignment was to go home and figure out how the body, mind, spirit are related. So I went home and I thought, that voice that told me you are to be a teacher. So I asked that voice. And I sat down on my couch and I had my yellow pad of paper, I had my pen all ready, and I lit a candle and I said, so tell me, how are the body, mind, spirit related? Well, I'd always only heard that voice talking to me. And it's not like that voice would come every day, all day. It came when I needed some profound answer. Anyway, for the first time, I actually saw that voice. And it was a massive figure in my living room. Like it should have gone through the ceiling. I lived in a little Calgary bungalow, one level house. But it was massive. And it was so excited to give me the answer. And it said, you have more than 3 dimensions. You have a body, mind, spirit, those 3, but you have a soul. At that point, I said, spirit and soul. I thought they were the same thing because people use them as the same word. And it said, no, they're 2 different parts of yourself. Okay. And you have oneness. So you have a body, mine looks like this. Barb, Kim, yours looks like that. We have a body dimension. We have a mind, which helps us organize the tangible down here on earth through logic and reason. It also helps us do our taxes, which are due at April 30th. So we're all scrambling and we have to go put our minds to work right now, trying to get them all done. But your mind organizes up your to-do list, your taxes, and organizes things down here. So then what is your spirit? So the spirit is you, looks like you, only it's your intangible you. It's, it can turn into a ghost after you pass. It came from unconditional love from the other side, where my little 3-year-old said, it's so nice over there. Yes, it's so nice over there. It's filled with unconditional love over there. And then you come down here. So your spirit came from unconditional love. It came down and got inside your body. It's got your mind, the logical part that will help you organize down here, like a computer. And it came down, got inside your body to have a life down here. So when I asked my students, what is the life you really want to live? Well, what is the life your spirit wants to live? It said you have a soul. So the difference between your spirit is the part of you that remembers the unconditional love. It longs for unconditional love. It has things it wants to do down here in the physical, tangible world. Eat delicious food, enjoy traveling around the world, whatever it wants to do. But your soul is your purpose. It's your meaning. Why did you come down here? And it's a marvelous life when your soul purpose is also what your spirit wants to do.
Hmm.
So I feel like my soul purpose coming to me so early at 4 years old, it was a marvelous thing
Mhm.
to be able to have that so early. But at the same time, it can be a burden because you're trying to live up to this soul purpose. But can you see the difference between spirit and soul?
Yeah, I like the way that you articulated that to everybody to be able, to see the difference and to separate them because you're right. We often use those words interchangeably.
Yes, and I'll show you even further why that's so important to separate them. But then you also have oneness, and oneness is your God, universe, creator dimension that is connection and belonging. This comes to what is your version of God, creator, universe. So when my dad saw that I had drawn out an old man with a long gray beard and a dagger of lightning bolt, he intuitively, even though he knew this was a mysterious concept, he intuitively knew God is not a divider with a spear. God is connection and belonging. God says, you're welcome. Oh, it makes me cry. God, God is, you're welcome here. You belong here.
Yeah.
And if you're doing the opposite and being divisive, then that is not a solid oneness dimension.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was the first. Then it said you're born dominant in one of these dimensions and you grow the others over time. So body dominant people love their spirit came down here and yippity doo dah. I love the hair, makeup, nails, fashion, traveling, delicious food, spices, setting a beautiful table. I'm not body dominant. And I've had to come to learn ever since the universe slash God gave me this model. I had to start appreciating the physical more because I thought it was a big waste of frivolous time when I should be working on my soul purpose.
Mhm.
But now I realize that it's so much fun. And when I go to a body dominance house for dinner, oh my goodness, it's a wonderful experience because they've gone to so much effort and it's so beautiful. And I try and learn some lessons from them about how to do it myself because in a way it is still oneness, to create a beautiful dinner for people you love.
Mhm.
You belong here at my table and I've made this very special for you. It's a beautiful connection, like
Mhm.
integration. Mind dominant. They love the logical. They're really good at logical, rational thinking, systems, organization. They tend to like to be the CEO of companies or running our school systems, running our government, running our hospitals. And because they know how to create a system for large groups of people to get through. Doesn't always mean it's the best system. But we have to live within our means. But mind dominant people, they'll create a system. The trouble is, I also talk in my book about when mind dominant people get stressed. When they stress out, they become micromanagers and they create more hoops and systems and paperwork and everything for you to jump through. I was saying this, I had to give a lot of online workshops to nurses during COVID. And I kept being asked, oh, we're this nurse organization in Ontario. Oh, we're across Canada. We're home care nurses. I had American nurses, and they were all going through. And this one nurse said, I just realized I am a mind dominant nurse manager, and I am burning out my nurses because I'm stressed during COVID and I am making more checklists for them to fill in. And for those spirit dominant nurses, okay, who are they? They value unconditional love, peacefulness. They're healers. They've become a nurse because they love their patients. They love to see them getting well. And if they're palliative care nurses, well, I know you're transitioning to the other side. Let's make you comfortable and loved the whole way through. They are spirit dominant nurses. Well, this mind dominant nurse manager was making it so that the spirit dominant nurses didn't like their job anymore because they couldn't spend the time they wanted to put unconditional love with their patient. Then the soul dominant nurses, they're also healers. This is their purpose in life, is to be a healer. And they might become quite multimodal. They're doing Reiki, they're doing hypnosis, and so they really expand their soul purpose through nursing. And then along comes this mind dominant who only sees nursing in terms of this logical, rational framework. So do you see how I'm? Then oneness dominance, they value connection and belonging above everything else. So let's go back to when I had a student in my class, and I would teach this to teachers at teachers' conventions. When the light goes out of a child's eyes and their eyes become dead, that's a red flag. It means their spirit, the part of them that values unconditional love, peacefulness, because when spirit dominates, when they're stressed, their spirit looks out at a world that seems unnecessarily harsh and abrasive and cruel and competitive. And so spirit dominance, when they're stressed, their spirits sometimes just want to go home. And that's in my opening when you read my bio. I lived in that feeling of, I just want to go home. How long do I have to stay here? When do I get to go home? And it wasn't until I received this book here, this model, that I thought, you know what? I've got to make this my home, Earth my home. I've got to dig in and find ways to love my life as a human being. Because I have plenty of time to be a spirit when I actually do transition. I don't know how long I have here to make Margot McKinnon my human experience as brilliant as I want it to be. So when I saw a student where the life was out of their eyes, I knew that their spirit had wanted to go home. And I'd say, well, come on in, chat with me. What's going on? And I used to say it like this: tell me what's happening. If I can help you, I'll help you. If I don't know how, I'll find somebody who does. Tell me what it is. And frequently it was they wanted to go home now. Mm-hmm. Well, then I would go, okay, well, this is a spirit dominant. They're turning into a ghost in their life as a human being. And their body is kind of becoming invisible and their life has gone out of their eyes. And frequently I would say, I would go to their soul purpose and I'd say, if you leave now, then you've lost the meaning of your life. You haven't even found it. You're young. If I do anything with you as your teacher this year, It will be to help you find your soul purpose. But let's go over here to the body. Are you treating your body well? Are you eating high nutritious food? Are you exercising? Are you taking care of yourself? Do you need a haircut? Do you need to change out of your hoodie into something because you're a gorgeous, beautiful person? Take care of your body. And we'd often go into what is the life that you want to live down here? And quite often they lived in this kind of imaginary world where they were living a dual life, one in the spirit and one in the human, more in the spirit than the human. So I had helped them enter into their spirit world. And I remember one boy, he was building skateboard parks in his spirit world, but in his earth world, he had dead eyes, a hoodie on, and never did anything, and he was failing. So I would say, well, let's go and look at your timetable in the mind dimension. Are you taking the courses you need to become a skateboard park builder? Are you taking physics, math? Let's get you into drafting, and let's redesign your timetable so that it's going to get you to the place where your spirit wants to be. Let's pair them all up. So it really was helpful to be able to go to where was the dimension that they needed the help in. And were they spirit dominant kids? I did presentations at Teachers Convention on invisible students. And all teachers know what invisible students are, and all students know what invisible people are. And they're the kids that would come in under a hoodie, all baggy clothes, usually monochromatic, all black or all blue, sit, and they never engaged. Well, I learned how to unlock the potential. First of all, they're spirit dominant, and they have a rough time in a mind dominant system. Lots of chaotic noise in the hallways, bells going off, because spirit dominants are quite often very sensitive to noise, smells, taste. They were the little kids that had rashes on their skin if you put too much detergent in the wash. They're just very sensitive kids. And they can start shrinking or not coming to school at all. Because by the time they get to, I tell teachers, look, by the time these spirit dominants get to school, they've heard the alarm clock, they've gotten up, they got dressed, they walked over, they're already exhausted by the human experience. Because spirit dominance becomes saturated every single day by the human experience, need to go and have a nap. So how can we make it so that these spirit dominants can have just a lovely, peaceful glide into school? I used to do it as an English teacher by 20 minutes of reading so that they could slowly let their spirit integrate into a classroom. Often my spirit dominants were massive readers. Even those ones who were in the low-level English classes, they were reading all these really super cool books. And I'd have the kettle going with herbal tea, and they could make themselves a cup of herbal tea, sit at their desks, read for 20 minutes, let their spirit kind of settle into the experience, and then they were ready for learning.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I wish this had been around. Well, it probably was, but I wish I would have had access to this probably 30 years ago when my boys were young, right? Because I think that there's so much, it just makes so much sense. And,
It's so practical. That's the whole thing, Kim.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, it's really, really practical and true. I agree with you. I wish I had known it. My kids were, I think they were like in grade 6, 8, and 10. But when it came in, and then I could help them navigate their teenage years by asking them, my number one job as your parent is to help you create the life you want to live. tell me what it is. And, my older boy, I want to kayak. I want to have a log house in a forest. I want to drive a pickup truck. I want to work mainly outdoors and it needs to be really physical. I don't want to be sitting in an office in a cubicle anywhere in my whole life. So I want to do that. And he actually has all that. He has a job where he is, off there in vehicles and out in the wilderness and all of this. So he's manifested that. And whenever he has to move around a lot, whenever he buys a house, he tries to match it as closely to the log cabin where his spirit wants to live.
That's
Right.
That is really neat. And I think it's really, I love what you shared with us because it makes me just hope, like I'm thinking about my grandchildren and, just other children that you meet in your life, or even people that are maybe in a stuck spot that you're like, oh, I could use this theory to kind of help guide them back to their soul and their spirit
Correct. And
individual.
I think also, Kim, what's important is, and it's what I teach. I have lessons. I call it stilling the noise to hear the voice. We're starting again this spring. So I run them about 3 times a year. It's every 2 weeks you get a lesson and you get, well, because I'm a teacher, so I give you, nobody likes this word, but it's homework to do. So you go into these exercises so that you can really understand how your spirit's working. But the idea, one of our lessons is how you are impacted. So if you had a mind dominant parent who was bossing you around and telling you what your spirit experiences were, or belittling them, or if you had a body dominant parent that forced you into, like, can you imagine a very sensitive spirit dominant boy who's sometimes I've noticed sometimes they're massive readers, they're poets, they're artists. But if they have a body dominant dad who always dreamt of having an NHL hockey player, there's going to be a problem. I was giving this presentation at Teachers Convention, and I had like a massive, I don't know, 1,000 teachers in there. And this man came up to me afterward and he said, I realized that I'm a mind dominant science teacher. And I now realize why I ruined my marriage because of my mind dominance.
Hmm.
But my teenage son, I can salvage that now. I realize I'm on the cusp of ruining that too. So what you want to do when you see yourself heading down these stress behaviors, for me, it's wanting to go home. I say, okay, oh, hello, my old friend wanting to go home. Well, come on back in here, spirit. Tell me what you want to do today, and we're going to do only what you want to do today, which, I'm an hour from the mountains, which usually means I bundle up my camera, my journal book, all my poetry that I'm writing and photography, and I drive to the mountains, and I'm not allowed to come home until I feel inspired. And that's my way of dealing when I'm stressed. Um, and but if you're mind dominant, quite often, and I get a laugh from my audiences when I say this, you'll notice that you're calling everybody an idiot. I work with a bunch of idiots. Look at all these idiots on the road. Man, everybody's an idiot. Well, it's people who are not fitting into your system. You have a system, and anybody outside of that is an idiot. I was driving with my friend, and while there were so many idiots on the road, she must have used that word 3 times, right? And finally, she looked at me and she said, I bet you think I'm stressed. Kind of do. I haven't said anything, but she knows all my stuff, read my book, so she knows. So if you find yourself going to the stress, but you see, spirit dominance, if they've been told they're idiots long enough, they actually think they're idiots. Spirit dominance work with a different logic.
Mhm.
They work from spiritual logic, which is not the same as mind logic, and it's not the same as body logic either. So I've written this book, and I'm not here always trying to plug. You can probably understand this, but I have this stressed out. I have an inventory in here, so you can see yourself. Like, what are you doing? And it's about pressing, but at the same time, my daughter is like extraordinarily mind dominant, and we've butt heads because she told me she thought I didn't love her as a child. Because here's the example. She wanted to help me make a stir fry, and she said, "How can I help?" And I said, "Oh, you can cut this carrot." And she said, "How do you want me to cut the carrot?" And I said, "Oh, any way you want." "Yeah, but what if I do it wrong?" "Well, it's impossible. A carrot tastes like a carrot no matter how it's cut." "Well, what if, but I still think I'll do it wrong." "Well, if you don't like the shape, then the next time you help, try a different shape until you find the shape you like." In her 8-year-old self, she thought I didn't love her. She told me this story when she was 26. She said, "I thought you didn't love me because you wouldn't even tell me the correct way to cut a carrot." Well, you see, I'm a teacher and I'm a spirit dominant. There are many, many ways to do things. Many, many ways. So important to find your own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you see, like, and I get some parents saying, "How do I get my mind dominant child to be less rigid?" It's hard. It's really, really hard.
They have to get your book and read, and then they'll get all the ideas behind it, right? And I think that's an important thing is that, we can get this help out there, but we actually have to take some action ourselves to find these answers and maybe
Make it happen.
self-correct or redirect. I don't know if it's self-correct, more of a redirect ourselves into that. So,
Well, I think, I saw this quote and it said, "Awareness is empowerment." So becoming aware, like I used to explain away my stress behaviors, that's actually good. "Oh, I need to have a nap, retreat from the world and re-energize." Well, going to look at how long you're napping or wanting to go home.
mhm.
No, I'm now at a point in my life, and I started this sort of in my early 40s, um, that I said, no, I really want to figure out how much of all these 5 dimensions I can explore in this incarnation as Margot McKinnon, the teacher. So the body dimension, I used to jog, but I gave up jogging, but I'm going to go for my 4-mile walk. And I'm thinking of joining the gym again because I want my physical to be strong. Eat nutritious foods, watch, how I care for the body self. Got highlights in my hair. But, and the mind, like you get this vision of what your spirit wants to do. Okay, you've had the vision, now pull that down. What are some mind things you need to do? We talked earlier, Kim, about because I want to make snippets of films, and we were talking about that. And I said, "Oh, what mic are you using to put onto your cell phone?" And so we were exchanging. Those are all mind things. What equipment do I need to pull that vision into reality? Do I need to take some courses? Are there people on YouTube who can show me how to do that? Do I need to read some books about how to do that vision that I have for myself? And then it's important to know what it is your spirit wants to do. And then your soul purpose. A lot of people I find come to me because they don't have their soul purpose. So that's part of my webinar too. That's one of the lessons is how to go into your soul purpose and then oneness. But I do, and I know we've been talking for almost an hour here, but when I think this is important to tell your audience, is when I got this vision and it was delivered to me, That massive figure did not start with body. It started with oneness. It said, you have a oneness. You have a soul. You have a spirit. You have a mind. You have a body. And in fact, in this book, I wrote this book, the first one, The Exquisiteness of Being Human, because at that point I realized I have to find the exquisiteness of my life. As Margot McKinnon, I'm so much trying to go home. And you know what? I've had 2 near-death experiences, right? So and people would ask me to come and give a guest lecture on my near-death experiences. And I used to get up there and I'd say, well, during my near-life experience, oh, I mean my near-death experience, it was like, oh my goodness, being so spirit dominant, wanting to go home, instead of saying, what is my vision for my life? My spirit wants to live, bringing it down to the mind, doing all the thinking that's going to pull it down, making it tangible down here on earth by actually writing a book that's tangible. Here it is, you can touch it. I was having a near life experience by not pulling my vision down here and making it real. So I don't want to have a near life experience. So anyway, back to this idea, it said oneness. It brought oneness in first. And not to say oneness is more important. I like it. That boy put it in a pie like this, showing that each dimension is as important as the others. I didn't want it as a hierarchy. It said, don't put it as a hierarchy where one is more important than the other. Because if you're going to stay in spirit, if you don't bring things down here and here and develop these fully. So in saying that, that voice gave me oneness first. And I think now, what would happen to the world if we all put connection and belonging first? Like we're in a time period, like part of the world's blueprint, where there were wars around the world. In our Canadian context, provinces pit against provinces. What would happen in Canada, the United States, everywhere around the world, if we said, let's go to oneness first, connection and belonging first. And if it's not about connection and belonging, that we're moving away from the whole blueprint we're supposed to be on. Mm-hmm. So the universe gave me oneness first. However, my editor, so I wrote it with oneness first here, but my editor for the second, this is more like a workbook, my editor said, Margot, if you're talking to a lot of mind-dominant people, they're going to get lost with this concept of oneness. They're going to think it's too woo-woo. It's very ethereal and not something we think about every day. Mm-hmm. But we should, I think. So he said, put body first. People can understand. Oh, yeah, I have a body. I can see it.
Yeah.
I have a mind. Yes. You can move them to spirit and say things like, is your spirit getting crushed at work in your mind-dominant job? Is your soul purpose getting crushed?
Yes.
You know?
Yes, exactly. Well, can you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your book, your workshops, those kind of things?
Well, here's where we are. You can purchase my book from my website, which is drmargotmckinnon.com. So Dr. Margot, Margot, McKinnon.com. I have a new series coming out. We're going to start it May 3rd. Now, I know people are going to watch her podcast at different times and they're going to say, oh no, I missed that May 3rd to get in. And we are getting results defy logic results when you know how to still the noise to connect with the voice, we're getting results that are unbelievable. I love it when they happen right in front of the person. They're all in there. They can sign up for those. And when they graduate from stilling the noise, which is 7 lessons, they tend to want to get into my Ask the Universe because they're going, well, this is working so beautifully. I don't want to go backwards. So then they join a monthly where we meet once a month and we get a question and we ask the universe like a question. So what our question for this month coming up is in all of this kind of rupture and divisiveness that's happening in the world right now, what role, universe, do you want me to play? And then the universe, because they know how to still the noise to hear the voice, then they start getting downloads for the role. And then we come online and we share what the universe told us about what our role is. So that's our question. You can all have that question, everybody. You can go nuts. But
Yeah,
yes, you can
I'd
go and
love to
find
hear
me
back if people get something, please like send
Right.
us a message and we'll let Dr. Margot know.
and just go on my website. You can send me a message. And I frequently get, you said on a podcast you answer your emails, and I'm checking to see if you do. Well, yes, I do, Roger. This is really me answering your email. I don't have an assistant doing it for me. I really love to hear how this impacts people. I love to hear their
Mhm.
stories, you
Yes,
know.
us as well. So we thank you so much for spending time with us today and all the information that you gave it. My mind, and I'm sure Mom's is too, is just whirling with all this information. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, you're
Yes.
welcome so much too. And maybe since we live in the same province, we'll meet each other in person
That
someday.
would be lovely.
That
That
would
would be
be
lovely.
that would be
Down the
very
road.
lovely.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was such a treat to meet both of you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you right back at
and
you.
you as well. And
Yeah,
everybody else, we will see you on the next one.
Okay.
you bet.